Yes.
It's September the 18th, 2019. This is 508, a show about Worcester. I am Mike Benedetti. This is Brendan Melican.
What's up, brother?
How are you doing, Brendan?
Fantastic.
Brendan, here at the top of the show, let's round up the headlines with Worcester in 60 seconds. There were lots of crime stories this week, including an attempted kidnapping and a child porn bust. After a hand count of the results of the municipal preliminary election, Ralph Tissioni and Evan Corrigan remain tied for 12th in the city council race. Rather than have a runoff to break this tie, both men will be on the ballot in November. Running for mayor will be incumbent Joe Petty, also Colorio, Coleman, and Sarkodie. There's lots of action on climate change in the city this week with various events connected to the global climate strike. The city council has endorsed the declaration of a climate emergency. The state's Catholic bishops issued a statement on the climate crisis saying, among other things, action is needed at all levels of government to encourage replacement of fossil fuels with renewable sources of energy while ensuring that the most vulnerable in society are protected from harm during this transition. And the Worcester City Council definitely wants to ban plastic shopping bags at retailers, though not at other places. The retailers could give you a reusable, recyclable, paper, or Astm D6400 compostable bag. How are we doing on time?
That was exactly 60 seconds.
You know, Brendan, we've been doing this show a long time, and a lot of people would say, what good has that done you? And the answer is, I can guesstimate 60 seconds a lot better than I could 12 years ago.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well done, Mike.
Yeah. So
there's a lot in there.
There's a lot in there. And we could be talking about environmental stuff this week. We could be talking about election analysis this week. We could be talking about the bus this week. What's got your heart? I
would genuinely look, because I'm kind of excited about it, but at the same time, I'm still kind of up in the air as to like, okay, what is the expectation? The action on climate change with the city council is something I'm thrilled about. Bags being gone. I know this is probably driving you up the wall, but I'm thrilled that we banned bags. The climate change part of thing, though,
I can tell you what the expectation is.
Yeah.
This is based on the actual thing that they endorsed, which, if this is like most things the city council votes on, nobody on the city council read. But I am not being sarcastic
on it.
I am not being sarcastic, viewer at home, listener at home. I know for a fact that many city councilors do not read many of the things that they vote on.
Sure.
Be it further resolved, the City of Worcester commits to educating our residents about the climate emergency and working to catalyze a just transition and climate emergency mobilization effort at the local, state, and national levels to provide maximum protection for our residents as well as all the people and species of the world. And be it further resolved that the City of Worcester calls on the State of Massachusetts, the United States of America, and peoples worldwide to initiate a just transition and climate emergency mobilization effort to reverse global warming by restoring near pre-industrial global average temperatures and greenhouse gas concentrations that immediately halts the development of all new fossil fuel. So this is what they're asking for, that we immediately halt the development of all new fossil fuel infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Rapidly phase out all fossil fuels and technologies which rely upon them, end greenhouse gas emissions as quickly as possible, initiate an effort to safely draw down carbon from the atmosphere, transition to regenerative agriculture, end the sixth mass extinction, and creates and guarantees high-quality, good-paying jobs with comprehensive benefits for those who will be impacted by this transition. I have a lot of mixed feelings about benefits, honestly. I feel like this is maybe some sort of World War II era thing where jobs started offering benefits as a way to avoid paying taxes or having to comply with wartime restrictions, and now suddenly we just have this whole, I don't know. I just feel like it's a mess, but that's just weird nerd stuff. Like overall, I like the idea of doing climate action. I feel like the really concrete thing that they're committing to is that they're saying that we need to stop all new fossil fuel infrastructure.
Right. So, and I guess this is where I'm confused with some of this, right? Because I don't, just to be clear, don't disagree with any of it. Like, this is out of the park, well written, well presented. The way that's written, and if the council now supports this officially,
yes.
So no new fossil fuel infrastructure. Does that mean that like the city of Worcester should not be able, if a home is being built tomorrow, that home can't have natural gas?
I feel like
Like, you
it's
can't run a natural gas line the 20 feet from the street to the house, and I'm okay with this, right? I'm like,
maybe. I think it
that's
definitely
infrastructure. That's like the definition of infrastructure.
definitely no new gas stations. I think no new gas stations in the
Yeah,
city.
so no new gas stations. We shouldn't even actually, more important, every couple of years, everyone knows that like gas stations are heavily, heavily regulated. Like
Yeah.
you always have to pull up the tanks every couple of years, have new tanks installed in the ground so you don't have any seepage or leakage into the ground.
Yes.
That's infrastructure. That's new, right? So like every time that's done, like we should within 10 years see no gas stations in the city of Worcester.
I'll say this. You remember a few years ago that people were working on stopping the Dakota Access Pipeline.
Yeah.
And that there were people in Worcester, including people close to my heart, who got arrested outside
Sure.
of one of the banks on Main Street that was doing some lending, funding this access pipeline. I would say that now that they have endorsed this, the next time somebody does that kind of climate action, trying to shut down a pipeline, the city council should definitely be going on record every single time as saying, we support this, we support our citizens doing this, and every single time there's anything that the city can be doing pipeline related, they should just be like, no pipeline anywhere near the city of Worcester, no pipeline in Worcester County, no pipeline nowhere.
Yeah, but again, and I'm not trying to like be a jerk, probably a little bit, but like, again, fully support everything that's written here. But like language matters, and like the language is when you're talking infrastructure, like. I think a lawyer reading this, like it shouldn't be hard to find a lawyer who in City Hall who would say, okay, we just made it a violation of city ordinance to replace a light bulb on a street light, because that light bulb is right, because currently not powered by solar.
Probably it is in Worcester, though. We're like one of the greenest cities in America, Brendan, as you might find out if you read
I know we get all sorts of rewards. They come with signs that we can put on the exits of 290.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not being like, I'm genuinely curious, like even on the activist side, like how thought out was this in terms of like, do we just let things kind of start decaying in Worcester because we don't have a plan B for any other form of energy infrastructure?
Well, I'll tell you. Excuse me. Definitely parts of this are like customized to Worcester, which I appreciate. I mean, I assume that this is sort of based on a general template. Like, I think that your nitpicking is helpful.
How about roads? Because
I feel like
our roads are literally made with oil products. Can we build roads? Like
that doesn't mean that
better definition.
Infrastructure made of fossil fuels is different than fossil fuel infrastructure for the fossil fuel industry.
Okay.
I mean, I think that there's this there's this real challenge here, which is that if you ask the city council, hey, sign a anti-climate change thing, and they say great, and the anti-climate thing change thing says the Worcester City Council officially likes whales and butterflies.
Yes.
Like that's not actually a good use of anybody's time, and
Sure.
because you're not committing the city to anything. So reading through this and trying to figure out, is the city committing? I mean, like the city saying that it's in favor of this is much better than the city saying no, there's no climate change. You know, every city vehicle should roll coal from here to the end of time, whatever. The alternative could be absolutely better than that. But I do think it's useful to read through this and try to figure out, is the city committing to anything new? I mean, the city has a lot of green benchmarks and a lot of green plans.
Sure.
And we're definitely moving ahead on these green benchmarks, and we're probably not moving ahead as fast as we should have. Things like the plastic bag ban, I mean, that's something separate, a topic. That's something the city should have done a decade ago, 15 years ago. I mean, now it's kind of the thing, so it's much less risky for the city to do it. So maybe prudence-wise, it's better to do it now. But anyway, I think it's useful to read through this and be like, okay, like, are there a couple bullet points of things the city actually committed to that are new?
Right.
Or did the city just, if it's just the city reiterating its commitment to these things, that's fine.
And it's,
I guess, make a big deal about reiterating it, but that's nice.
In terms of the nitpicking, it's similar to, I think, the way people should, but probably don't view certifications like organic, right? Like it probably, whatever you think that certification means, probably not what it means at all, right? Like those certifications are, they're collections of buzz terms for marketing purposes. They're not really helpful in terms of making food decisions. I worry that, again, like if last night the city council voted like, you know what, like legit, like we're not investing in anything that involves petrodollars at all. Like we're not going to spend a cent in that in a hard line, right? Like I would actually be cool with reinventing civilization from starting in Worcester. I'm okay with that. But I'm not sure that that's really what the city council was intending, and I'm not even sure that's what like the activist community was intending. And I think another way to approach that would be protecting people who will be impacted the largest by climate change and a climate emergency, right? Because
Yes.
like one of the things that goes in line with that is if you look at the world's militaries, right, like what they're discussing in terms of climate change, and there's probably no, oddly, other than like hardcore environmental activists, there's probably no collective groups more interested in climate change than the world's militaries, right? Because almost
Yes.
all of them universally are the only form of government that's saying like, guys, like flag
Like,
on
we
the
actually
field.
have to deal with it.
This is a big problem, and primarily because it's like what, like all like 90% of like the world's population is like lives in like coastal areas and whatnot.
Right.
So the expectation is massive movements of people over the next the coming decades, as you know, people can't learn to breathe underwater that quickly. Like Worcester being a city that, for all the right reasons, has been so friendly to the immigrant communities and refugee communities that spring up from time to time around the world, and thankfully we allow them to consider Worcester home, and we do a great job of embracing them. That metric changes really really fast if, say, like an entire country goes underwater, right? Like Madagascar like sinks, like that's a lot of people that could be coming here, and the people who are likely to be most impacted by that are people who are already here, who would, I think, in the language of this ordinance, would be considered the folks that we want to be protecting in the first place. Like, there's some really
Yes.
interesting social dynamics at play that, while I'm thrilled the city council just signed up for, to your earlier point, I'm not sure they read any of this.
I mean, yeah. And, I don't, I mean, in some ways I don't blame them. I mean, there's a lot of stuff for them to read. If I was on the city council, would I read it all?
Do you think they read all their Christmas cards?
I don't know. That's why I'm not on the city
Holiday
council.
cards
They
and
definitely don't read all
birthday
their
cards?
Christmas cards. We could talk about this bag ban thing. We could talk about election stuff. What do you
I
care
don't think-
about this bag ban?
I think it's great that we did this. I mean, this is hasn't Councilor Luke's been talking about this for like a decade now?
I think everybody's been talking about this for so long, since the day I was born.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's just I think it's fantastic.
Well, I tell you why. I tell you, like, my only, like, can I nitpick this? Can I nitpick this great thing and find some way to bitch and moan about it? Sure, I can do that. So first of all, this only impacts retail establishments. Some of the soup kitchens that I work at, volunteer at, were like, does this mean we can't give people plastic bags anymore? The answer is no. It doesn't mean anything. It has nothing to do with you. Laundry bags, newspaper bags, produce bags, frozen food bags, all kinds of bags. The other thing is that, so the retailer can give you a bag which is a reusable bag. Okay. They can give you a recyclable bag, which is way less good environmentally than a reusable bag.
Yep.
Because, they can give you a paper bag, which, what the hell sign emoji? Like, I think we all know that from many environmental impacts, a paper bag is worse than a plastic bag. Not clear that a paper bag is any better than a plastic bag. Many people will point out, well, the plastic bag will be here 1,000 years ago and the paper bag will not. And the answer, my response to that is, in the city of Worcester, that's not true. In the city of Worcester, they're both going to be burned in a fire within a couple of days of you throwing them in the trash. So that plastic bag definitely won't be here.
Yeah.
It'll be ashes. Or you can give your customers an ASTM D6400 compostable bag. This, which I Google online. I mean, these are industrially compostable bags, like an industrial facility that does composting, that brings its stuff to a very high temperature for long periods of time, can compost this bag within a number of weeks.
Right.
I Google online, like, can you do this in your home compost pile? And I think the answer is no.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely possible that if the stars align correctly, a bag or part of a bag in your compost pile could compost, but you can't just throw these in your compost pile or leave these in the gutter and expect that they're going to compost.
Right.
So, like, it seems crazy to me that that the council even has that on there. I feel like they should just cross that one off and be like, listen, compostable plastic bags are just as much of they're not as much of a nightmare as plastic bags, but they're up there. I mean, 100 years from now, maybe even 10 years from now, one will be here and one won't be.
Right.
But 3 or 4 years from now, probably they'll both be here.
Yeah, and I guess, do you do a lot of gardening?
I look at a lot of gardens.
You look at a lot of gardens. So I've always found it really neat that we made a switch in a lot of areas to like compostable little planter cups for like
Yes.
seed starting and whatnot.
Are you talking about like plastic compostable or like peat?
like the sort of like the peat ones.
Yeah.
But,
The peat ones. My parents always used those when I was a kid.
yeah. Well,
Peat
my
pots.
favorite thing about like turning over a garden every year is like finding a year's worth of those from like 2 years
Oh,
earlier
yeah.
still in the ground. Like the things that we think just disappear, to your point, don't actually just disappear. And I mentioned like organic certifications earlier and whatnot probably don't mean what a lot of people think that they mean because the word carries a lot of weight, but the definition of a certification is something completely different. The way we think of and define compostable, like in an industrial way, so it has a certification, is not what people think of when they're taking their kitchen scraps and throwing it into a pile in the backyard. Compostable, like we use all compostable products in our store, but you're not going to throw those in with like your garden scraps in the backyard.
Right, they're not just going to go away.
And just plant them next year. Like you're not going to be planting spoons and straws. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
It's compostable on an industrial level, which just means that instead of taking tens of thousands of years to break down, it might take a decade. It might take a year, depending on the product. But it's still going to be there if you were just to throw it out the window of your car. We can't go back to the styrofoam McDonald's days where everyone's just throwing Big Mac containers out the window and whatnot. And that's.
I mean, I feel like on the like this is in some aspects. In some important aspects, this is greenwashing. I mean, greenwashing is nice because people are sort of publicly saying we care about the environment and therefore we're going to do all these things that don't help the environment. But that first part of publicly saying they care about the environment is great. I think the second thing after somebody starts greenwashing is to hold their feet to the fire and say, hey, like, can we, like, next spring, go in front of the city council and say compostable bags, not good, not helpful.
Yeah.
Let's not do them. Take that one out of the ordinance.
Right.
And just to if every season, if every spring you come by and like tweak each of these ordinances, tweak the carbon emergency ordinance, I feel like that's part of moving in the right direction. I mean, and again, like the carbon ordinance or the climate emergency ordinance in some ways is just restating all the many climate action plans we already have and have been working on for 10 or 20 year. So I wouldn't sweat rewriting that so much. But this bag ban, I would love to have somebody rewrite this bag ban. I'm not going to sweat it because I can't put my energy in this area.
Well, and it's also over time you'll have more data that can be collected that can show what we should actually be working on too.
Yeah.
Like it's only going to be a year or so now where we'll have good regional data from certain parts of the United States as to like what banning drinking straw, like plastic drinking straws in the restaurant industry.
Oh yeah.
What kind of impact does that actually have? If it turns out all anyone did was go out and start buying massive amounts of straws to carry around with them, and the way people carry tissues, now they just carry big packs of straws so they can bring their own wherever they go. Maybe it didn't have the impact we were thinking it was going to have, and that might not be the thing to get heavy-handed on.
Do you think so? Part of me wonders like why it is that the council didn't do this, say, 15 years ago or 10 years ago when it was kind of a thing. And I wonder if, so part of it obviously is like the communities around us are doing this bag ban. So anybody who wanted to say, well, you're hurting Worcester businesses because everybody's just going to go to Shrewsbury or Holden to do all their shopping. You can say, well, no, they also are going to run up against a bag ban. So we might as well, now we can't have a bag ban without worrying about that. And that B is part of this that we've just slowly moved into at least a slightly post-retail society where people are like, well, I get all my stuff from Amazon. So I really don't care how people who buy stuff in a store get it. Because like I don't buy stuff in a store that much, and that people, the idea of like, oh, we're going to lose all these retail jobs or whatever is like, listen, we're already in the middle of a retail holocaust. We're already like going to end up probably shutting down one of our malls, all this other nonsense. Like a bag ban on top of this is not noticeable at all.
Maybe, but I think it's, if anything, it more highlights a weakness in our form of government where the reason it wasn't acted upon when it was first brought up was because people are afraid of being laughed at. Like that's it. I mean, it's one of our bigger supermarket chains, Price Chopper, did this themselves. I think it was the start of September. It might have been August.
Are you thinking of that? Them
Big
or
Y.
Big
I'm
Y?
sorry, Big Y. And I would be thrilled. I'd be really, really interested to see what internal data led them to make that change. Right? Was it just because they saw the writing on the wall and like, okay, this is going to be easier to do this now as opposed to rush to do it down the line if we have one community that does something brash. But or did it get to the point where like 10 years ago, maybe people having their own collection of reusable bags was kind of not the norm. But over the course of 10 years, every one of us like probably now has a closet in our house that is just full of reusable bags.
Oh,
like,
yes.
the reusable bag, and there might be more reusable bags kicking around Worcester than there are disposable, single-use plastic bags. So now it's at the point where like the retailers that are here, are they really going to feel the pinch? And to your point, so many communities have already done this. I don't think there's any fear to get laughed at. But yeah, I feel like I feel if anything, we'd call this like the Polito factor. And if someone tried to move on this 10 years ago, you would just have like angry AM radio guys like just making fun of the soft flower children of Worcester getting rid of plastic.
What a bunch of hippies who don't want to poison the earth. What's wrong with
hating plastic? Is like the most hating plastic is the least American thing ever. I don't know, whatever. It's like plastic for patriotism. There would have been a movement. People would have gotten anxious for no obvious reason instead of just recognizing that.
Listen, Brendan, pancreatic cancer is our duty as Americans and as capitalists.
But I think it does come to a real thing that we talk about a lot on the show, is that Worcester tends to be about 10 years behind the curve on almost anything, right? Like when it comes to technology, when it comes to social movements or what, we're a little bit, rarely are we first out of the gate.
Sure.
And that's not a bad thing. It's just because it gives us an opportunity to see what has and has not worked elsewhere as we go to make changes. I think sometimes it's frustrating to a lot of us that see a problem and know that there's a fix that exists, and you have to wait for that fix to come through. But
I mean, the nice thing is those fixes frequently come through, and then you have a really good model ordinance from someplace else. And you can say, oh, what's the best practices around bag bans? Great, let's do that. I think
ultimately that's what we saw here was a combination of just people being a little conservative in terms of the willingness to move, and alongside that, we're just slow to get anything done.
Start at the Street was a cool event this year, Brendan.
It was a great event this year. It was also a beautiful day.
You didn't go down there?
No, I did. It was a beautiful event.
I had a good time. I'm not sure what to say about it.
That's the thing. My routine now for starting. Your routine is dressing like a 1920s newsboy and handing out papers.
Yes, it is.
I just like walking through that crowd and kind of being reminded how few people in the Worcester area I actually know. It's nice to see friends and whatnot, but like I really love looking at the faces of all the people I don't know and just being so happy to see people I don't know around me. And there was tons of them this year.
It is nice. I'll have to say to the listeners of this program, it was nice to have a handful of acquaintances and a handful of total strangers come up to me and say, hey, thanks for doing those school committee interviews.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, when we were doing those interviews, I was not really happy with the way those interviews turned out. But a lot of people, I think, or based on what people coming up to me on the street and talking to me, people were like, yeah, like this was kind of the only resource I had for the kind of information I wanted to know. Like, I think in some sense, people just want to be like, I just would like to sit in the same room for 5 minutes with every one of these people and ask them like one question and just see how they think, how they behave, where their head is at. And that kind of gives that to them.
Yeah.
Where otherwise you're not going to get that from most of these guys.
My one criticism of Star on the Street.
Yeah.
Lots of dogs in strollers. Lots of dogs in strollers.
I didn't see a single one.
There's so many dogs. I saw more dogs in strollers than kids in strollers.
Yeah.
And usually when I go out, like in my head, the one thing that's screaming inside my brain is your kid is way too old to be in that stroller. Like if your kid's feet are dragging on the ground, or like they're trapped under
Brendan, some of those people are adults in wheelchairs.
No, come on. It's awful. What a terrible joke to me. I was making a decent joke. You made a terrible joke.
Keep going.
No, I mean, like I get really frustrated with kids that like your toddler should be walking. A little exercise. It's a good way to start things off here. Life. But this year it was all dogs in strollers, and I've seen that in other places, but like dozens. And the thing that was bugging me was, I mean, I'm always very quick when somebody's coming with a stroller. As a parent, like I know that's frustrating that you're in a big crowd. It's tough to navigate and whatnot. And oftentimes you feel like you're the person who's like making things miserable for everybody else because you have to navigate the stroller. So I'm very, very quick to like get out of the way. When I see somebody where their arms are like this, they're pushing something, I'm already looking for a path to the side.
Yes.
But when that person gets to me, and there's a small dog inside of that stroller, like I don't feel bad for like you. Not only did you just like waste my time, now you made me angry at the fact that I've been navigating my way out of your path so you'd have an easier day. So your pocket dog didn't have to walk. What dog doesn't?
Your dog doesn't want to be there.
Your dog. Well, maybe the dog. I don't know, but the dog should probably be walking. This is.
Well, the funny thing is I did dress like a 1920s newsboy, so I didn't wear my glasses because it wouldn't be period appropriate for a street urchin. What?
There were no not-for-profits handing out glasses.
I
for
mean,
your friends?
when you're being a newsie, you're sort of being a cleaner version of a street kid.
Yeah.
And those street kids did not have prescription glasses. So, they barely had shoes. So, I saw a lot of strollers. I didn't see a single dog in a stroller, but I also couldn't see that clearly. So now I'm just sort of thinking like, man, there must have been dozens of babies that came by that I was like, that's an ugly looking baby.
Yeah, you were just
That actually was a dog.
You were working on smiles so hard.
Oh,
4
my
smiles.
goodness. That's so funny. We're coming to the end of the show. Brent crude oil is $64 a barrel, up 6% on the week and down 18% on the year. Bitcoin is $10,100, unchanged on the week and up 61% on the year. We could talk about a little bit of election analysis. We could talk about a little bit of transit analysis. We could talk about Mayor McCheese for a couple minutes.
You know what I would love to, and I don't have much, and I don't feel like enough people turned out to vote to actually have a conversation about an election. I think if anything, we should still be having a conversation about which one of your friends on Facebook are lying about voting, because
I've heard multiple
mathematically a
people
significant
claim
number
this.
of them are lying. That's.
Yeah.
You know what I think we should be discussing, though, is we need to have a segment on this show. Maybe we can lump it in with any future candidate interviews.
Yes.
Alcohol or death metal band. I was walking down Pleasant Street to get down here, and I crossed a guy who was wearing a black T-shirt. It was definitely a death metal band. We know that because there was like cartoon skulls and writing that I could not read, because it was like, it looked like somebody had written it with a marker behind their back on a wall. It was like, but all I could make out was what looked like White Claw. Like, it looked like the band name was White Claw, but it couldn't be, because White Claw is the really fancy hard seltzer that people who probably tick off that box as like no explicit lyrics in their iTunes playlist drink. And I was thinking, like, wow, that would be a great, like, maybe we could bring Snow Ghost Bruce Russell in here, and we'll have a list of beers and alcohols and like obscure death metal bands that he probably wouldn't know the name of, and we'll have him guess which is an alcohol, which is a death metal band.
I would love to do that.
White
I would love
Claw.
to do that.
Great band name, Mike.
I started doing some election analysis, and I came up with one. I was trying to figure out like what's actually worth graphing or charting from this election, and I came up with one graph that's definitely worth charting, which is a graph which says not that many people voted in this election. See, more people used to vote the last couple of elections. This preliminary election, lower. So that thing I can look at. I ran a bunch of numbers as far as like how people did like the last time they ran versus this preliminary election. And the preliminary election is weird. And, the last time they ran is weird. So it's hard to try to figure out to make any of these numbers match up. Mm-hmm. Like comparing the 2017 general versus the 2019 preliminary, blank was pretty close. Blank ballots were pretty similar to from this time, prelim to the last general. Mayor Petty fell very little.
Wait, can you just, I think it's important that our audience understands how many people blanked out. So in
2019, 17,000 people. Let me say this. This isn't blank. This isn't total. This isn't completely blank ballots. Mm-hmm. This is a weird measure that I came up with, where there's you have six votes per ballot. So this is a 6. So I just basically was like the equivalent of 17,000 blank ballots, right, if you add all the votes together.
And what did Mayor Petty get?
He got less than that.
Yeah, so he got 5,000.
So he got 5,000. That's in this prelim.
I know, but there's something there that like I think it's important for people to understand that when somebody says something as brash and hostile as nobody is more popular than Mayor Petty, like they actually mean like nobody got 3 times the votes of Mayor Petty.
I have to say, this is why doing this analysis has been confusing. I'm not sure that that's an accurate thing to say. I'll say this: of the people, Mayor Petty got 57% of the people to vote for him in this election. That's where that blank thing is kind of confusing.
We do have that number then. So 37% had at least one blank.
No. Again, we had the equivalent of a third of the ballots were completely blank.
Which one of these numbers would represent, though?
I don't have blank ballots. I mean,
Ooh.
we have blank ballots on this other sheet. This is this is kind of like when we're describing how to get to places I don't know in Worcester. I mean, in this election, we had 17 ballots that were completely blank. 17 people who just went in the booth and said, screw it.
Yeah.
And threw the paper in the thing and walked out without marking anybody on there. Anyway, we should not talk about blanks right now because, again, it's statistically confusing. The mayor and Jack Foley turned in performances percentage-wise that were pretty close to the last time they were running for election. A little bit lower, but Foley in part, you would expect the school committee people to be a little bit lower, and the council people actually both to be a little bit lower because there's kind of like a broader slate of candidates running, and because none of the incumbents are pushing that hard for some dumb preliminary election. They're not really pushing their people that hard. They're going to wait till later in the year to campaign. The people who did way worse than their last turnout would include Calorio, Biancaria, and O'Connell. And, again, it's like a little weird to compare, an election that you're in with 7 people running for 6 seats and an election with 9 people running for 6 seats with 13 people running for 6 seats. But, yeah, especially when we're looking at the same guy, like people who people like Biancaria and O'Connell who ran in the same election as Jack Foley. Foley got 7% less in the prelim than the last final percentage-wise, which is fine. And these other guys each got almost 20% less. So definitely like Biancaria and O'Connell are considerably less popular among the group of weirdos who vote in a prelim election than Foley.
Sure.
Than Foley. And, we can look at versus 2015 too. I have to go back to 2015 in part because when you're trying to compare, like I have all these people who've like ran for some office in 2015, didn't run in 2017. So like, how do you, again, like some of these comparisons are weird, which is why I haven't made a chart of it. But again, like Jack Foley and Mayor Petty have both did pretty well in the 2019 prelim versus the 2015 general. Both of them actually got more percentage-wise. Tracy Novick did pretty well of all the challengers or all the pseudo-incumbents. People who did sort of terrible, Tony Economou, we can't really compare because it's a district versus a general.
Sure.
Calorio, it's weird to compare a school committee versus a council race, but she did not do well. O'Connell and Biancaria, again, both of them did poorly in 2019 versus 2017, and both of them did poorly in 2019 versus 2015 too. So both of them have sort of, both of them have done. Both of them have lost a little bit of their juice over the last 5-6 years.
Yeah.
End of story. Long story, confusing story, numbers. Everybody, thanks for watching the 508 show. This is Brendan Milliken. I'm Mike Benedetti. We will be back from our closet or from a non-closet space in Worcester very soon. Remember, Worcester, you can bench more than you think you can.
Have a good one.